Here's something here you probably haven't seen in a long time.
I'll be darned. I was old fatso then. Is it? And about 5 years later, and lose 5 pounds every year. You know, Marv Olson was one of the great guys, and the pressure was on for me to give Greg Levy the job.
Mm-hmm.
Greg had lost the job.
Oh, you were the owner then in '46?
Yes.
How did you get? Give me a little background as to how you got involved in Jamestown baseball.
See, I lived about 17 miles away from here as a boy, and Jamestown was probably the biggest city. Dunkirk was the second biggest city that we had any contact. My father was a farmer.
You lived in Silver Creek?
South Dayton.
South Dayton, yes.
And I played ball and played some town team baseball, and we had neighbors who were very good ball players. One played in the minor leagues, and they were the Wolf brothers. One managed Wellsville when they were in state semi-pro, Wellsville, Sinclair Oil. Chan Wolf was the best. He played for Erie, which was a Class B league when Jachym and Chief Bender were there. And they would have me warm them up, and they hit fly balls, and I had to get the fungo bat and hit to them. And I was 13 when I made the high school team, and they played for Forestville, and Forestville would hire guys to play September when the county fair, and they beat Jamestown Spiders. They had Apple Holland, who played for Baltimore, the AAA ball club, and Billy Ward played, I think, Class A baseball. And so I was now about 15, running around with Rich Bradigan and Chan Wolf and those guys, and absorbing everything. And one of the funniest things about after the game, we played in the Buffalo Evening News League. Played against Lackawanna and Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls had Hank Gornicki and Sal Magley on the team. And Chief Witter was one of our ball players. He was principal at Silver Creek High School, great athlete in his own right. And Rich Bradigan, they'd go to the bar after the game and they'd say, 11 beers and a glass of milk for the kid. It'd be embarrassing as heck, you know, but it was a great experience. Yeah. And they could hit fastballs. I mean, like we knocked Magley out of the box, and Sal would cry. And we couldn't, he learned to throw a curve after when he went to Mexico. They taught him how to throw the curveball. But we could hit speed. Those farmers, that didn't bother them. But the curveball, you know, God, they'd have their foot in the bucket, you know. But it was great. So I ran around, then went to college and played freshman baseball at the University of Missouri. And we had some real good ball players. We had a pitcher who went directly to Connie Mack, Philadelphia Athletics, and he pitched a no-hit, no-run game, an exhibition game. And we had Joe Carr. Paul Chrisman was the first baseman. Paul was a better football player in baseball. His brother was Mark Chrisman, who played for the Browns. And so I just played I wasn't good enough to play varsity ball. And so I stopped, but because of playing, I played a little freshman football and freshman basketball. You knew all the athletes. And so I knew all those. There's one sport that I was probably better than any of them. In the University of Missouri, I could throw horseshoes. And in one of our phys ed classes, we had the assistant football coach handling the horseshoes. And I'll never forget him, how he didn't know anything about horseshoes. And everything in sports is balance except horseshoes. And he used to teach the kids and said, we have a job in Jefferson City, Missouri, you know, state capital. And I said, great. So I went out there, and we had the AP desk, Howard Flager, who took over U.S. News. He was the AP correspondent in World War. Walter Cronkite was there with United Press. He was in Kansas City and Jefferson City. Bill Knickerbocker, INS. Bob Bragg was a classmate of mine. He became sports editor in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. And they were about 3 years older. And, you know, this was a great experience. I was 22 then. And we had a room where they'd drink and smoke cigarettes. And I never drank or smoked because I thought I was an athlete. And just like Heck said, you know, smoke-filled rooms. And, you know, who's got this story? I covered the legislature and the city council. Didn't cover sports. And one day the managing editor, he said, would you go over to the railroad yards? There's a man there, get a story on, the first Republican governor since Reconstruction days, and an honorary colonel on his staff is a man named Branch Rickey.
Huh.
And I knew who Mr. Rickey was, and I said, great. And I wasn't covering sports, I wasn't sports editor or anything, so I went down there and interviewed him, and I knew Branch Jr. Branch Jr. was with Brooklyn Dodgers, and Mr. Rickey said, when we got through, he said, young man, I want you to go to work for me. He said, it was Cardinals. And I said, Mr. Rickey, I have a Bachelor of Journalism degree. I said, I've been only out of school about 7 months, 8 months, and I said, I want to continue doing this. And he said, all right, and I enlisted in the Marine Corps, and I thought I was going in June 1941, before the war, and came home. I left my job in Jefferson City, came to the farm in June, and my mother looked at me and she said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm going in the Marine Corps. And she said, what are you going to do until then? I said, I had made no plan. She said, you better get a job. And I was the only child, and
Yeah.
my parents were very strict with me. They were wonderful, but they were, and I said, well, the only places I can go is Jamestown or Dunkirk, and Wade Forsythe was a good friend of mine. And I came up to see Mr. Hill. He was the publisher of the paper. He's from Nebraska, and he took me to Gretchen's kitchen, and we had, we had soup, salad, and pie, 25 cents, and he said, terribly expensive. In Nebraska, it'd be 20 cents. And I said, well, I know he's not going to offer me any job to pay anything. And he said, would you come to work here? And I said, golly, if he thinks this is expensive, 25 cents. And I think he offered me like $12 a week. And I said, I'll think about it. I can't think of a sports editor. I think his name was McGuire then, something like that. Frank Hyde wasn't here. So I went over to Dunkirk, and I wrote a sports column for the Dunkirk Observer when I was in high school, and Herb Schwartz was the managing editor. And he said, what are you doing? I said, I just came in from Jefferson City. He said, want to go to work tomorrow? He said, our boy was drafted, Freddie McKee. And he said, you can take over his work. And I said, great. They gave me $15 a week, which is quite a bit more.
Yeah.
So I went to work there, and I'm there for about 4 weeks, and got a letter from the commandant. Because your class was 1940, we're postponing your induction. We're taking the class of 41. They're not working directly into officers candidates class, and you won't come in till October. So I've got a job now until October, which is great. And about 4 weeks later, Roy Dissinger, which in those days we didn't call him a super scout, but he was a super scout out of Wilmette, Connecticut, said, we finally located you, we tracked you down. And he said, the old man wants you to go to work for him. And I very flippantly said, if I can stay on the paper, and I'll go to work for him. So I became the youngest scout in baseball. I was 22 then, and I had Ohio, Eastern Ohio, Pennsylvania, Northern Pennsylvania, Ontario, and Western New York. And so I very flippantly said, if I can the paper went to bed about 2 o'clock. So from 2 to 11, I was running around all over the country talking to kids and then I ran the baseball schools at Gowanda. We never had a baseball school in Western New York, and went to see Dr. Jones, who was the head of Gowanda. They have a grass diamond, a beautiful place. And I said, I'd like to run a baseball school. It'll be for the St. Louis Cardinal organization. He said, what will it entail? I said, we'll have all the equipment, everything. We'll probably have 100 boys here, and we'll come in here on a Sunday. And they'll play, they'll take batting practice, pitching, we'll run them for time trials, and we'll do a lot of things like that. And he said, why should I grant you this? I said, well, all your patients can be welcome. And I said, I'll give them some activity. They'll see all this. And he said, that would be great. And so we ran the school there, and we came up with a wonderful ball player. I finally saw an article on him in Sporting News many years ago. He was probably as good a prospect we've ever seen in Western New York. Came from Cattaraugus. His name was John Weehus. and I played semi-pro ball. I got $2 a game for Cattaraugus, and the manager called me up and he said, I want you to look at my boy. He's a catcher. He said, he isn't great, but he said, give him a try. And I said, he came up and he said, I brought a pitcher. I thought you might be interested. It's John Weiss. He's about 6'2", weighed about 205 pounds, all muscle and bone. He could take a milk can, which is 85 pounds of milk and 25, and just put it up on the truck. And I said, well, he'll be muscle bound. We got him on the mound. He pitched to 3 guys, and Roy Dissinger said, get him off the mound. He said, I don't know who else is here, you know, the Yankees, Cincinnati. He said, we don't want him throwing anymore. We took him to see his father that night, signed him up, took him to Rochester. So he'd throw batting practice. It's just September.
Yeah.
So he pitched batting practice, and so nobody'd know. Then he was drafted. He came out 5 years later. But I've never. He was the closest thing maybe to a Western New York Bob Feller.
Mm-hmm.
He could throw hard, nicest kid, and he'd throw inside. You know, Feller did too, but we don't know if it was intentionally. He was so wild. But this kid was unbelievable. Well, we got Lyle Parkhurst. We had Danny Ozark, Jimmy Carlson. Jimmy was one of the great ball players in Jamestown, the War Room, did 5 years. He had an arm, tremendous arm. Irv Carlson had a great arm, but Irv played short. Jimmy could hit the ball. We played, I'll tell you the next story about Jimmy Carlson.
Mm-hmm.
So I had all these kids, and I said to Bud Williams at Dunkirk Observer, he said, what kind of a tryout? I said, he had a great tryout. He said, you know, we have 4 games at Chautauqua County. We get the best semi-pro teams and we play them. We had Jamestown and all these. And I said, you know, these kids are much better ball players, but than these guys. I said, you've got older men, you know, they're going downward. They don't have any motivation. You know, they're going through the motions. They look good, you know, they don't know how to handle the glove and the bat. I said, these kids, and he said, what are you talking about? I said, you know, these kids are much better ball players. He said, you think you could form a team? And I said, I don't know, maybe. He said, and I'll let you play the 4 games. You'll play all 4 games. I thought about it, and I said, might as well, these are all St. Louis Cardinal prospects. We call them the Lake Erie Redbirds. And so I said, I've got to get some games under the belt. I want to win all 4 games. And I called Chautauqua, and Chautauqua had a bunch of college kids, and they had Cameron, who was the coach at Mayville, and Hawks at Chautauqua, and they had some pretty good ball players. This is 1941, and Hawk was the manager, and I said, I'd like to bring some boys up between the ages of 15 and 19, and we'll play you. And they said, how much do you want? I said, we don't want anything. They said, oh, we don't want to be bothered, you know. And I said, well, you know, these are boys that are going to go to camp, St. Louis Cardinals down in Florida for spring training. And I talked to him. He finally said, all right, we'll play you. We came up, and I threw Parkhurst at him. We beat him 4-1 first game. They said, we want another game. I said, no, I'm sorry. No. He said, please, we got to play you another game. Well, I had Danny Ozark on second base. He was the best 15 or 16-year-old second baseman I've ever seen in anything. He was just unbelievable. And they said, play another game. So I said, all right. We came back, and they brought a kid named Monfort, who pitched for Flint with Steve Gromick. He was the same, and Cleveland released him, and he's from Portland right here. And Monfort was a good-looking pitcher. And I said, well, I guess I'll put Parkhurst again. And we were leading for 7 innings, and then they got to Parkhurst. He got tired. They knocked him out of the box, and now we were ahead 7-3. Now it's 8-7. They're ahead. We got 2 innings. We tied it up in the 9th inning. And I put a boy in named Woody Bradish. He could throw. He didn't have a curve or anything. He was from Mayville. And we went in the 10th inning. We got 5 runs. Jimmy Carlson hit one in the tennis courts.
Okay.
And, you know, that's quite a blow. And Paul Webb, you know, Webb's restaurant, he got 2 for 4. We had Bobby Brown on second base. Bobby was All-American soccer player at Cortland. Lou Brown's brother, he played for Nashua. And we had Allie Stefan. Allie played for Beckley, West Virginia. He had a rifle too, and short side. He'd go in the hole. Jimmy Carlson on third. I mean, you've never seen better arms than those kids had. You know, they could throw the ball. Jimmy couldn't run. That's his, you know, in those days, a third baseman got by or a catcher couldn't run. But today, if he doesn't run on third base or a catcher, that nobody wants him.
Yeah, that's right.
And 5 years later, that was room Jimmy Carlson. He could have been a great, great prospect in those days. But he could hit the ball. Everybody liked him. He could field. He was no Brooks Robinson or Billy Cox, but he could field, and he had a great arm. And then I said, let's play one more game before we start. And Cherry Creek had a fire festival, firemen taking them all over. And they said, would you like to play a game? I said, heck yes. And there was a boy in Jamestown named Munson. He signed up at Cincinnati Reds after the war. And Maury Mastretta was his catcher. And I said, Maury, can you get this boy to come to Cherry Creek and play? Maury comes up with his catcher's equipment. And I said, Maury, these are kids. I can't have you catching. I said, I promised there wouldn't be one over 19. We had Beef Grewich from Silver Creek catching, and we had Jack Coburn played first base and pitch. Jack never lost a game in the Ivy League. He went to the University of Pennsylvania. And I said, we can't have you. We got two catchers, Grewich and Harry Malik, who came with Danny Ozark, and it hurt Maury because he wanted to hold this kid, and we beat Cherry Creek. So we win 3 games. Now we're going to play 4 games at Chautauqua County Fair. In the first game, we played the county champions, Asheville, Louis Brown, and we threw Parkhurst at him, and they beat him. I mean, we beat him easily. They weren't that good. The second game was Cherry Creek, and Cherry Creek got a pitcher to teach there, and they were all sure. They got a kid from Class C ball named Jim Constanti. And they came to Hamlet to see a friend of mine and said, we're going to knock this team off. He said, didn't know, and there's something. And I said to myself, Jim Constanti was a second baseman pitcher then in the Canadian American League. So I got Monfort from Portland, we beat here to pitch, and we beat them, knocked Constanti out of the box. He couldn't believe it, these kids. Well, he had Danny Ozark. Hell, he could play at 15 or 16. He could go in the Pony League. He was that good. And we beat him, and then we beat American Legion team of the best of Chautauqua County. It was an awful game. We beat them about 15-0, and they had Bud Erickson, who became general manager of the Atlanta Falcons. And he went to Michigan State. Good-looking third baseman, played like Pie Trainer, stand up. And we beat, and Bud's always teasing me. He said, you beat the heck out of us. Well, I had kids from Western New York, from Pennsylvania, from all over. They just were American Legion boys. And then the fourth game we were going to play was, I said I'd give it South Dayton a chance to make some money. And they had Chan Wolf bring the pitch, and I had the best pitcher maybe in the history of Buffalo at his time, a boy named Bob Perry, pitched for Simon Pure. And the manager, Simon Pure, said at this level, at his age, he's better than Warren Spahn. He said, Warren played for me 2 years. Bob Perry got a sore arm, went to Duke, and Brooklyn signed him up, and he just couldn't throw. But he threw a heavy ball, and I used to ask Mr. Rickey, how can you teach a boy to throw a heavy ball? He said, it's a spin, and you can't teach him. It has to be natural. Catchers hated to catch Bob Perry. He broke bats, the ball came in heavy. And I had Bob Perry, and we were rained out and didn't play South Dayton. And Bob's, I think he retired in Buffalo. All ball players could get a job at Ford. Huck Geary, all those guys would get a job. Orville Cott with Ford Security Services. They'd be punching in the clock, going all around. And I called Bob Perry about 6 years ago. He and Bud Erickson were at Duke together, and what a great kid. And it's just a shame,
Yeah.
I remember pitchers used to say, we've got so many throws in our arm, and that's it. And I didn't believe in it, because I thought if you throw more, you get stronger, But they mean that you have one bad throw and you're done.
Yeah.
He hurt himself, and he played for Olean, and which reminds me, that's how I got into baseball. Then when I was in the Marine Corps, Mr. Rickey, I came home in '44 from the 1st Marine Division, and he said, you're coming to me with Brooklyn. And I went to see him again, and one day Branch Jr. said, knowing you, he said, I think you'd be happier if you had your own ball club. And I said, I don't have any money. He said, you'll raise it. And I said, which one? He said, Jamestown. I laughed. I said, I've been talking to Harry Biscar about it, for some time. And I said, I thought I'd go to work for your dad. And he said, you'll be structured. You know, you're regimented. And I said, I was 4.5 years in the Marine Corps regimented. But he said, I think you'd be happier. And I was talking to Harry, and I finally saw Harry again, and Harry wanted to get out. And I bought the ball club for $22,500, which is a record price, you know, at that time. And we had to buy a bus, and so we had to buy a bus. So I think I begged and borrowed. My parents gave me $2,000, and I was a captain in the Marine Corps, and I had saved about $5,000 and borrowed all the rest to buy the ball club.
Wow.
And so I come in here, and Fred Smith and everybody wants me to give Greg Malevy the job. And I'd been talking to Mr. Rickey all the time, and he said, the first thing you have to do is assert yourself. You're the boss. And I said, if I let Greg Malevy manage the ball club, next thing the public's going to tell me who to pitch and say, now, you know, you better pitch Ted Wybernack. He's a local boy, you know, and give it to him. So I said, I'm not going to give Greg Malevy a job. So I called Greg and met with him. I said, Greg, I can't have you as a job, as the manager, because the public wants you. And I said, it's hard firing him. If you don't do the job, the public would be unhappy. And so I called Mr. Rickey, and I said, Mr. Rickey, would you give Greg Malevy a job? That's how he got Olean.
I'll be
And
there.
I got him a job in coaching. He and Fresco Thompson, so he got a lifetime job because of that. If he were with Jamestown, you know, he might not have gone anywhere. And Marv Olson and Greg were the shortstop, second baseman for Buffalo. And so I called all my friends. It was a three-way. Tommy Thompson at Baltimore, and I talked to Mr. Dunn about him. And the only thing is, he said, Tommy leaves bills unpaid. And he said, you're going to have a problem. He said he's a poor financial man. And Jim Levy, who was here, he was a wonderful athlete, you know, played for the Marine Corps and played football, baseball, basketball. And Jim did not have a good year in '45, so there were a few of the old timers who said, bring him back. And I said, again, and so I talked to general manager of Syracuse, who was general manager of Buffalo, and Marv Olson played for him, and Joe Engel had him at Chattanooga. He managed Chattanooga and the Warriors. And I said, Marv, I want you to come here. And he said, my gosh, Class D, you're managing Double A. And I said, we'll pay you. So don't worry, you're going to get a big salary. So I brought him in here and saying he's Swedish, you know, Olson. I said, no one's going to be mad at him. He played for Buffalo. And I said, he works well with youngsters. And that was very important to me, that he could work well with youngsters. So we had a big banquet, and there was all kinds of rumors, you know, what's the banquet for? And I put up Marv, met him at Westfield, put him in the Portage Hotel, one of the worst hotels. I didn't want him Hotel Jamestown or Samuels, you know, it would leak out, you know. And then brought him in, and we were all sitting down there and introduced him as, you know, Marv Olson. And, you know, Marv was
Now, this was what, 46?
46. He was like Walter Alston in the minors. He never caused any front office problems, handled everything. He knew baseball. He might not have been like Casey Stengel, or he might not have been like George Anderson, you know, but he was wonderful to have youngsters. And we got the cream of the crop, the Tigers, because we trained at Hershey, and, you know, everybody else stayed in boarding houses, like in Woodstock, Virginia, or Staunton. And we stayed at Hershey in hotels, and I took the kids to the hockey games, the equivalent of the Stanley Cup. Carousel came. I had 40 or 50 tickets so they could see Carousel, and so Wish Egan and Billy Evans and Red Rolfe and Ray Kennedy, they gave me all the best ball players. You know, they had a farm club in Thomasville, one in Troy, Class D, but we got the cream of the crop. They would say to a kid, you're going to a place, a wonderful baseball team, wonderful city, you know, the Diamond. We had a greenkeeper. He was the best I've ever seen. When the Tigers came here, they were world champions. We played an exhibition game. They said, this Diamond's as good as Navin Field, you know, which is Brick Stadium today. It was just marvelous.
Was that Munson?
Yes.
Yeah.
What was his first name? Gus.
Well, we call him Gus.
Gus.
Yeah.
He was unbelievable. He worked 14 hours, 16 hours.
They told us I used to carry grass seed in one pocket and top dirt in the other pocket.
And there were no stones.
Yeah, no stones.
Well, I came back to look at the infield about 7, 8 years ago. I couldn't believe it. I mean, you never had a bad bounce. The field was immaculate. And so Marv, and I kept my relationship with Mr. Rickey, constantly asking him, and then very fortunate I became his financial advisor late in life, and we had a different relationship completely. But he was the best sports figure, and I've known all the great football coaches and the basketball coaches. There was no one like Mr. Rickey. He was so far ahead of everybody else. He was just a genius. He should have been a president of Boys University, because character meant so much to him. And he was always trying to redeem somebody, like Leo DeRocher, and he thought he could turn him around. Well, you can't turn guys like Leo DeRocher around. But I was with Mr. Rickey when he signed Jackie Robinson, and I didn't know he was signing him,
Okay.
And I got to know Jackie pretty well after baseball. He was vice president, chock full of nuts.
Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, that's kind of fascinating. How you were with him, and what was Ricky's
I was with.
thought processes?
I came up to see Mr. Rickey, and I always would see Branch Jr. because he and I got to be very close. And he is diabetic, and take care of himself. He used to shoot himself through a pant leg. He drank Coca-Cola. Wonderful human being. Anyone Mr. Rickey couldn't sign, he always said, "Boy, would you handle it?" And so they all liked Branch Jr. And I came to see him, Mr. Rickey, and I went in to see Branch Jr. and he says, "Oh, Dad will want to see you." And he said, "Come on." We're going in, and going through the lobby, there was this black man sitting there, and Mary Jones was the secretary. And she said, "You can't go in." See, he said, "No, Dad will want to see." And so we burst in, and he was talking, I think, to Sukford and somebody else, and I think the guy in Montreal, what was his name? Hooper, wasn't it? Clay Hooper, Southern
Sounds
manager.
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I didn't know they were signing Jackie Robinson. I didn't know I knew Jackie Robinson, the great athlete at UCLA. So I never knew it till maybe after the signing was up that this was the first inkling. Mr. Rickey didn't tell me he was looking for black ball players or anything like this. Got to know Mr. Robinson when he was vice president, chock full of nuts. And I happened to like Jackie, and I knew a lot about him. It's a terrible thing to try to be an innovator or be a pioneer, and that's what Jackie had to do. He was a great ball player, really a great ball player, and he was really old. That's the problem. He broke in when he was 21. It'd been all the difference in the world, but he broke in when he was 26, 27. Played 1 year at Montreal, and Brooklyn had a wonderful ball club. It didn't compare to the Yankees, but they had some talent on the ball club. He had a hard time breaking in, but just like Sukford said, it means money in your pockets. The other ball players, you better accept them. And he was exciting type of ball player. Because I got on first base, there's going to be excitement, and he was willing to do everything. And he was tough, but guys who handled him same way, he respected him. Like, that great incident when he ran over that second baseman, in New York Giants, kid, Davey Williams, that back, Dark went into third base and he knocked Robinson. I knew Alvin pretty well, and he knocked Robinson. Robinson didn't say a word, he said, "I did it to Davey Williams, reciprocate." So, and Dark, there's a great story about really Dark, he was drafted #1 by Reese Neal, Philadelphia Eagles football. And he came up very highly touted. Perini was going to sign him. And we looked him over, Detroit. Wish Egan was wonderful. Wish was a practical baseball player. He was a super scout for Mr. Briggs, for Mr. Navin. And he finally said, "I'm getting this much from Perini." And Wish says, "You go ahead and take it." He said, "We can't give you that much money." And so Alvin, I played golf with Alvin, good golfer, very good. And Alvin said, yes, he said, I would have taken less with Detroit, but they didn't want to give me that much less than, Perini. And they said, "Just take it." And Alvin could play. And, he weighed 185 pounds, and he hit Jackie Robinson. He just knocked him way the heck into the coaching box. So Jackie was a great team man. He'd give up, hit behind the runner and things like that, which in those days was kind of only a few would do it, you know. And he was, I think, probably my favorite ball player with the Dodgers was Gil Hodges, because what a wonderful man. And but they still didn't have the talent of the New York Yankees. You want to get back to Jamestown and Detroit. So the first year, I asked Chandler, and I've got pictures in our home when I went to see him. I was a captain of the Marine Corps, and I knew Chandler because his daughter went to Stevenson out at the University of Missouri, and I met him in about 1937. And I asked him, would he come out and throw the first ball out for the opening ball game? And he said he would. Billy Evans was general manager, and Billy poo-pooed it. He said, he's going to call you a week before and said, I'm sorry, my schedule's busy, he's not coming. And I was naive, and I said, he told me he's coming to myself. And I doubted that he would turn it off. And he came in 6 o'clock on the Erie Railroad. I picked him up, took him to our home. He said, I woke up early, so he said, do you mind if I go to bed? So we had one child that, yes, and she said she'll keep the baby quiet so he can sleep. And so he slept, and we had Optimist Club had a luncheon. So he went to the luncheon, and then that night, the ball game, and he threw a ball out. We had 5,000 people, which was a record crowd. Then during the All-Star game, my contract with the Tigers, they were worried that, they were going to lose Jamestown because new owner, and all that. And I wasn't going to upset anything like that. So I said, I'd like to have you come down and play. They were world champions in the exhibition game. And I got to know Steve O'Neill real well. You know who they pitched against us? Newhouser and Greenberg went to the All-Star game. They pitched Trucks, Trout, and Hutchinson. Next day they played Williamsport. They owned the Williamsport franchise. And that was in the Pennsylvania-New York League, what was called then, in Class A. And they pitched Overmeyer. They pitched three, like Scribini's, and they gave us the three best pitchers.
Oh, wow.
Well, we had 5,000 for that game, and we had 5,000 for the opener, so we had 10,000 in two ball games. And but we treated those kids so well. You can't believe the personal interest Marv Olson and I took in the kids. I remember when we got Babe Beer in Waukegan, he was the old-time scout, and Babe's mother and father were Swiss, and he would go up to Buffalo and say, all right, Fisher was the scout there, and he said, they're going to send you to Nashua. There'll probably be a room with Campanella or Newcomb, and Mrs. Beer didn't want that, and so he signed them, and we got him. He was 17, and I think the next day he was 18, and I told Mrs. Beer, I said, she said, would you please look after my boy? And I said, I'll do everything possible. And we'd come back from Wellsville, stop at a diner in Allegheny, and Babe would be there, sitting at the counter, eating 2 cheeseburgers, 2 milkshakes, and the things that I was supposed to look after, But Babe was he was an outstanding prospect. We had Framing and Beer that year, both pitched in the majors, and Babe had big, thick wrists, which we don't like, because the curveball.
Yeah.
We like the pliable wrists, but Babe could throw the curveball, and he was indestructible. He could throw all day. And so, we got all these wonderful ball players from the Tigers. They had kids, a boy named Jimmy Dimitriadis, 17 years old, played for Southwestern High School in Detroit. And he comes in here 17 years old. I think he won like 18 and lose 3, And these kids would all go back home to Detroit and say, you can't believe it. They'd get off in Westfield and take that interurban car. And they'd get the biggest kick out of that electrical train, coming in here. And then we'd get them the night before and then drive down to Hershey. But we had so many kids from Detroit. And Detroit, like St. Louis, Kansas City, and Buffalo, great sandlot program. And that they had ball players out of their ear. And they wouldn't send them to Thomasville. They wouldn't send them to Troy. I remember when Cedric Tallis was a business manager at Thomasville. And he and Red Rolfe were the same town, Concord, New Hampshire. And they wouldn't give them to, and Red Rolfe would say, Cedric, you get these guys. These are good players, And Cedric knew who were the prospects, the guys who were getting the top bonus was $4,000, and then it raised it to $6,000. If you got over that, you had to be a major league signee, and then you had to be optioned only so many years. Where if you were signed by Buffalo, it'd be $4,000, and optioned to Jamestown, then you could be optioned out 3 years. Then you get the Tigers another 3 years. You'd have 6 years to work with the kid. But if you were signed up with the major league club, you had only so many years options, and had to be. So the bonus, if you get over that, you couldn't be optioned out. So it was 6,000, 4,000. So we got all those kids at 4,000. Furlong from Salamanca, I signed personally. I gave him 6,000. That was raised up to 6,000. And
That's pretty good money.
Oh, and I'll tell you the nicest way about that. If you got a boy, and he knew that boys were getting 20,000, Frank House got 75,000. You know, we gave him the biggest bonus of this time then, and they knew, and they probably said, you know, they're taking advantage of me. And I said, Bill, when you go up through the farm clubs, I said, you'll always get a top salary. And he got as far as Little Rock as our Class AA, and the good friend of mine was the manager, and he ruined him. Managed Kansas City. He asked him about the 10th inning, the tie game. He said, Bill, warm up, put you in relief. And Bill went up and hastily warmed up, and he wasn't prepared. He hurt his arm. Bill's in Salamanca, plays golf every day at Elkdale.
He's still in Salamanca?
Yeah. He went in the school system, but Bill, gosh, he could throw. Gosh, he was a good-looking
You
pitcher.
were a kid watching him.
Oh, good-looking kid. So like, if you had a boy like Dimitriadis, see, he threw 3 quarters, and Paul Richards got him in Buffalo and on the pitch overhand, and it just tore his shoulder. You know, you pitched 3 quarters. He said overhand you'd be so much more effective. Left-hander coming down like this, you know, or sidearm, you know, either way. But he didn't want him throwing 3 quarters, and he ruined his arm. And you know, Paul didn't do it. We took care of those kids because they didn't get the bonus in the first instance. Fedorov, you know, Fedorov was signed when he was 15 years old,
No kidding.
illegally, and so he got his free agency, and he was optioned to us from Williamsport. Carlson was not major league material. Bartz was major league material. He played for Brooklyn for a few games. Eggers was a nice kid from Buffalo. Russ Kearns would you sign him up? And I forgot, Red Rolfe called me up. Red was farm director and said, we're going to send you a left-handed pitcher that is unbelievable. And see, Max was not tough mentally. And if you're not tough, you've got to beat guys 10-0. You can't just. Max had great delivery, live arm, but he wasn't tough, and he got up to Class A. He played at Hagerstown, and I think Williamsport. Ted Wybernack was a super basketball player. Played third base, strong arm, and there was really no future for Ted in playing third base. We asked him, would he be interested in becoming a pitcher? He became a pitcher, and he learned how to cut a ball. He went down in that Texas league, and he could throw mud balls and throw everything. He said, my arm didn't give out, but he said he learned to pitch. Well, what a great basketball player.
Yeah,
played for University of Baltimore. And a nice guy. Ted came to see us in California before he died. He and his wife, we had dinner with them. We took him to La Costa, I remember. I thought he'd get a kick out of seeing La Costa.
Yeah.
And Ted was, I liked him very much. There isn't a boy on the team I didn't like. Chappie was a third baseman. We had more third basemen that year. And, we won the league, I think, by about 14 games that year, because we started getting more and more good players, and it just ran away with it.
Well, according to Frank Hyde's history, he says, the Falcons of 47 blasted one Pony League record after another and stormed to both the pennant and playoff cup with such authority that the flag race was almost conceded in early August. The Flock's 87 wins and 39 losses.
Can you imagine that?
A 690 pace set an all-time mark for victories and percentage.
Amazing.
Wellsville and Olean were KO'd in the playoff semifinals and finals, the Oilers being crushed 21-4 in the last game of the series.
It dominated the league, which, isn't the best thing for the league, but, the Yankees dominated, and everywhere we went, they'd get big crowds. We'd go to Hamilton, Jamestown's here, they'd get the big crowds, so it was good for them.
Yeah.
We went to Bradford to get the big crowd. So in some ways, but this team was really too good. We were probably better than a Class C club. It was the next year we had, it's amazing we didn't win. And I'd say one reason we didn't win probably, you win 2 years in a row, you get a little fat between your years. The motivation isn't there. I wanted to move into other things. I wanted to get out of, Jamestown. I didn't push Marv Olson. Marv needed pushing a little bit, and we should have won. We lost by 2 games. Lockport beat us. Lockport had a couple older ball players on the team. It was the Cincinnati Red Farm Club. Fred Fleeg was farm director, and I liked Fred, but I think we had a better ball club. But they didn't play to their potential.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard. Look at basketball. Treat Pete. A guy like Jordan, who is the most competitive athlete in the history of sports, probably, and he did it just personally. Well, you in baseball, one man can't lift a team. One pitcher can lift a game, but you've got to have everybody playing well. And so we didn't win, and that's when I sold the club to Detroit and became assistant farm director. John McHale and I were the 2 assistants.
How'd that happen? Did you just basically feel you wanted to get out of it?
Yeah. I wanted to get on bigger things.
Mm-hmm.
I'd won 2 years in the Tide 1 year, and won 1, and then the third year 2 games out of first. And I said, what can I do now any further? And I wanted to do other things. I was one of the owners of Jamestown Safety Guard here, and I just said, if I'm going to stay in baseball, I want to go up quickly. And so I went to the Tigers, and then.
Was that common at the time for the parent corporation or parent club to buy a franchise?
No, they didn't do that at all, but they wanted to keep control.
Mm-hmm.
Ernie Kessler, Stolbrost, I think they had 4 men wanted to buy the ball club, and I told Detroit, I said, if you're not interested, you know, we have local people, but they don't know baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And the Tigers just felt, Red Rolfers said, we want to own it. You know, we want to control it.
Mhm.
And so they bought it, but it wasn't big. See, Class D ball clubs didn't make money.
Yeah.
We just, see, we drew 155,000 the first year. If you drew 50,000, you broke even. And it was a gold mine.
150,000.
155,000.
Unbelievable. I remember going to ball games with my father, and we'd stand on Faulkner Street, way up by Curtis Street,
Yeah.
to get in line to buy tickets.
And we'd hold the game up.
Yeah.
To do it. We drew 5,000 3 times that year, and if we drew under 1,000, if we drew less than 1,000, we thought it was a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
We stood in the outfield the night that Detroit was here.
Wait, did you stand there?
Yeah.
Did you see Trout stand on his head and
Yeah.
sign upside down?
And we threw the rosin bag to Clem Kishorek, struck him out with a rosin bag.
Clem, I had 2 nice talks with his wife this winter. She was our babysitter. That's how she met Clem. And, you know, we had 3 guys who were real fast. They used to have events, track events,
Mm-hmm.
throw a ball in a barrel. We went up to Hamilton. They had sprinters. 3 guys from our side, 3 from there. We finished 1, 2, 3.
Mm-hmm.
Fedorov was first. No, Lurchin was first. Fedorov was second, and Kishorek was third. And Kishorek could beat anybody on the Hamilton club. When Mr. Rickey drafted him, he asked me, he said, what do you think? I said, this kid will give you everything. You know, I don't know what his potential is. And he played 2 years, you know, in the majors. He was, he had a chip on his shoulder. You know, he just thought the world never treated him well because he's little. And I said, Marv, you're getting a pretty good kid, but, you know, whether you can handle him. And Marv handled him beautifully. He just handled him. He was, and that really was a hell of an infield. Fedorov, Kishorek, Orville Cotton, and Alexson. It was a great infield. Orville Cott was maybe the best athlete in the history of Buffalo. Bob Stedler told me this. He was all city track, baseball, basketball, football. And after he came up to play a basketball game, 101s. They were the basketball power amateur at YMCA in a tournament. I went over to see him, and I knew he was a free agent. And I said, Orville, I'd like to sign you up for Jamestown. He said, Jamestown, Class D? He said, you know, I said, well, get your feet on the ground. I said, it won't hurt you. So Orville said, will you give me a bonus? I said, yeah, I'll give you a little bonus. And he said, right now? I said, yeah, I'll go back to the office, write a check. And I gave him a $500 bonus so he'd sign. And he was just a super Class D player. Mr. Rickey signed him up and sent him to Washington, PA. And on that team, Vic Sisler, Bob Sheffing, and Orville Cott. Orville came out of high school. he said yes. And see, if the option he was getting $400, we would count, I think, 125 we'd pay, and the rest they would pay.
So you'd hire the manager?
Oh yeah, paid them all.
Paid all the bills.
All the bills. They didn't
And
pay anything.
the Tigers paid nothing.
Nothing. Paid spring training. You can't believe it. I went to Hershey because Bucky Harris told me. I said, Bucky was general manager of Buffalo, and I said, where would be a good place? And I said, I don't want to go to these boarding house towns, you know, where the guys are staying and they're eating at a table. And he said, well, the Philadelphia Phillies trained as manager at Hershey. And he said, no, everybody's gone to Florida now. So I said, okay. I was a captain of the Marine Corps. I drove over to Hershey, went to see John Sollenberger. He was a director. He was head of all the properties. And I said, I'd like to bring a minor league ball club here and train. And I said, I want to stay at the Hershey places. And I said, if it rains, we can use the arena. It was under roof. And Mr. Sollenberger said, young man, we can do this. I couldn't believe it. So we go down there, and we go down there for about 30 days, and I never receive a bill. Now, we're leaving, we're breaking up, we're going to play Sunbury and Ithaca College coming back here. And I went to him and I said, can I have a bill so I can pay you? He said, we'll send it to you. And I said, holy mackerel, that is nice. And so finally I got to know John Sollenberger, and I said, I don't know why you were so nice to me. He said, well, Mrs. Hershey's from Jamestown, New York.
I'll be darned.
Never knew that.
Catherine, she lived on, her sisters lived on the apartment building right across from the telephone company. There was a brick building, about 3 floors. And he said, Mrs. Hershey's from Jamestown. So he said, that's one thing we can do for Jamestown. And the bill was $5,000 for the 4 weeks. And $5,000 was a lot of money, you know. I couldn't believe it. And he said, we'll send you the bill. So I think I got the bill like, we opened last week in April or first week in May. I think it was a Wednesday. And we got the bill like in July. Well, we had received a lot of revenue, so I could afford to pay him. I didn't know I was going to have to borrow somewhere to pay them.
Yeah.
And Mr. Sollenberg, we stayed there. After I sold the ball club, the Tigers stayed there. And you know, you can't believe the kids. They have individual rooms, you know, with their toilet facilities there, and they could shoot pool. They could, you know, the rides were there. There was everything there. We had wonderful meals for them. It was just always buffet, like Gretchen's Kitchen, and so the kids enjoyed it. And the Tigers would love it. They'd come down there. Wish Egan would come down there, and Red Rolfe would come down there. A funny story about, we got a third baseman that we couldn't use, but the Tigers, Ed Catalinas or Louis Vincenzo, the super scout in Detroit, signed them. And so they wanted to give him every possible break, and they sent him down. And we had Orville Cotter could play third base. We had Ted Wybernack. We had 3 guys who could play third base. And this kid wasn't really a nice kid. Marv wanted to get rid of him and said, you know, we can't use him. He said, he's going to clutter up and we don't have enough room for him. And Swat Erickson was driving the bus, and I brought a boy from South Dayton who had got bad eyes. He was a barber, and I said, would you like to come down to Hershey to be assistant business manager? He and Charlie Paterniti were assistant business managers. And this boy's name was Sherwood Orchid, Lucille Ball's cousin, and he ran around with Jack Nealon, and so we're standing. Red Rolfe is leaving. I'm going to wave goodbye, and Red says, "Where's the bus?" And Sherwood Orchid said, Marv Olson said, let's get the hell out of here before they make us take that third baseman with us. I almost died. Red Rolfe laughed because we sent him to a farm club the Tigers had, Nazareth, PA. Nazareth's right near Egypt, which is Kurt Simmons' hometown. We sent quite a few ball players from here to Nazareth. It was teams in the Catskills and around there, little towns like Nazareth, and so we'd send ball players down there. But I'll never forget Sherwood Orchid saying, Marv says, "Get this bus out of here." He said, "Our Red Rolf will make us take that ball player."
That's a hoot.
Did you own many of the ball players?
I owned quite a few in Detroit at the first crack. I signed Tommy Hurst.
You signed Tommy?
See, Tommy's friend was in my Marine Corps company in Guadalcanal, and he thought he was a ball player, and he asked me if he could have when he heard I bought the ball club, that I give him a trial. I said yes, and he brings Tommy Hurst in there. He said, "This is a shortstop, and he's got a great arm." And we looked him over, and Marv said, "He's no shortstop, he's a pitcher."
Yeah.
And Tommy could throw.
He went to Buffalo, didn't he?
And again,
Hurt his arm or something?
Paul Richards hurt his arm,
Mhm.
and they finally sent him to Rome, New York. But Tommy could pitch. Gosh, he could throw that ball.
I played semi-pro ball with him later. He could hit, you know.
Was he a pretty good hitter?
He turned into a pretty good hitter.
Well, you know, I signed the kid who was light heavyweight state wrestling champion in Pennsylvania in Clearfield, Milt Jordan. Milt played for the Tigers several years, and a friend of mine brought him into camp, and I gave him a $1,200 bonus with my own money. And see, the Tigers had first refusal. If after the season, if they didn't want him, they didn't take him, you know, I'd send him somewhere else. And he was a good prospect, and the Tigers would reimburse me the $1,200. But it was a gamble. But I just thought this kid should have a chance. He was from Clearfield, Pennsylvania, state heavyweight wrestling champion. I didn't realize Clearfield was such a wrestling.
Oh,
Pennsylvania is a big wrestling
Still
state.
is.
Still is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so I signed up several ball players. Orville Cott never got reimbursed for his bonus, you know, because there's no need for it. Hell, he had done everything that we expected of him. But the Tigers didn't pay me anything. They played an exhibition game, which was great, you know, and let me keep all the money. And that's what Detroit was a wonderful organization.
So there was really no such thing as a player development contract back in those days.
But we had a boy named Jackie Schultz from West Seneca, probably the best swinger I've ever seen, left-handed hitter. Couldn't hit left-handers. And George Earnshaw, a super scout, the Phillies, comes in, and it's Labor Day, right before the playoffs start, and we're playing a daytime game. And he said, "Do you have any prospects?" I said, "Yeah, we've got some." I said, "You know, we're Farm Club of the Tigers. They have first choice." I said, "We got a left-handed hitter." I said, "Great, but he can't hit left-handed pitching." And Bradford throws a left-hander against us, and he hits it over the light towers,
Oh, my.
right field. Earnshaw, every time he saw me, he said, "How about that kid who couldn't hit left-handers?" Jackie got as far as Little Rock. And that's as far.
Most of the games, day games or night games?
Night games.
Night games.
We played day games, 4th of July if we were here, Memorial Day, and we even changed the Sunday into night games. All the ministers got passes. We gave them passes. I should have been like Tommy Richardson, give everybody number 1 pass, you know, but sometimes they compare. They say, "Hey, we got a number 1," but they all got passes. And I thought playing, you know, church services might not be done till 1 o'clock, you know, so we just played night, and they all were for it. They said, "Great," so we played night.
How about promotions?
We promoted. I was a great believer. I was a great believer that baseball itself is not enough. You had to have it. And we had excellent vending. It was good. Harold Love ran the vending. He did a good job. But we had promotions, and we had those contests, you know, athletic contests, and we advertised. We gave acknowledgement. We gave one year they were building the boys' club. They were building. They're going to put an indoor swimming pool, and I gave them a whole night free. I gave them all the receipts one night. I thought I could give back to Jamestown. Then we gave one night the Shriners, and Ben Avalon was and they got all the receipts. It's a wonderful cause. No, we promoted. We were interested.
Were there barnstorming teams that came around at all at the time?
No, they did.
The Al Shacks, were they doing
Oh, I had Patkin and
Patkin.
and
Jackie Price?
Oh, Price is the greatest.
hang upside down and hit
Right.
the ball. You know?
And get
Hang
the
by his
Jeep,
heels.
get in the Jeep and catch the
Jeep
ball. They'd shoot the bazooka up there and he'd
Yeah.
drive the Jeep and catch the ball.
Yeah, remember all
Oh, I like Jackie Price. And Al Patkin was funny, but I knew Al Trock and Shaq. I brought Shaq down here one year.
You did?
And put him up at Lenhart in Bemis Point. Took him to the town club, and Al had his restaurant in New York, a steakhouse, and town club, a steak, $2.75. Al says, "You can't do it. You can't do it. Let me see him bring." So I brought George Chambers, and talked to Al Shack. No, we had anything that was hot, we would go after.
Mm-hmm.
I drove Patkin back to Cleveland. I remember he said, "Hey, you can't, and there's no way we can get him." So after the game, I drove him back. Price to me was unbelievable. The things he could do, he was pretty good shortstop. He was pretty good ball. He couldn't hit, but he was, and his word was good. He was. Shaq wasn't a particularly nice guy. Shaq was not. I know George Chambers said I always brought all the celebrities. He said that he was not one of your nicer guys. Probably the best celebrity ever brought here was the greatest athlete of all time.
Jesse?
No.
No.
Babe Dickerson.
Oh, oh yeah, absolutely.
That's a trivia question.
Yeah.
That's right.
Grantlin Rice says there was no one like her.
When did you have her here?
Fred Parkin was her manager, and he was Sam Snead's manager, and I called Fred and I said, "I'd like to bring Babe down here." So we signed the contract, got Babe down here. She flew in Allegheny Airlines, and I had Audrey meet me, and Audrey's going to have a luncheon for her at Moonbrook. Audrey and I didn't play golf, but we were members at Moonbrook, and Audrey had about 14 women, and Babe Dickerson came over to my table. I was with a bunch of men. She said, don't you want me to hit some golf balls?" I said, "If you'd like to." Toby wasn't there, Howard Holmes. And I said, "Howard, can you give her some clubs?" So she went on and played 3 holes and put on an exhibition. And, she was the first woman who wasn't ladylike. She shifted her weight and banged the ball, And what was the Englishman, the Hope Windows, Major Garrett.
Yeah, Major Garrett.
And Garrett was just, he was in ecstasy around her. And she said, "Major, bet I'll," the boy shagging, he said, "bet I'll move him, bet $1. And, he said, "Oh, I'll take that bet." She hit the ball, and he moved about 5 feet. She said, "Give me $1. I said, "I'd move him." I wanted $1 from Frank Garrett. And then it rained, and the crowd was much smaller. We had about 2,700. And Babe said, "I'm not going to take any money." She came to our house, read. We got pictures of her galore. She read bedtime stories to the children.
No,
She said, "I'm not going to take any money." I said, "Babe, we're paying you." She said, "Well, you got a small crowd." I said, "Babe, I took insurance. We collected both. The rain gauges are up. You got the rain insurance."
How did you get that? How'd that work?
If you get so much rain, you pay insurance so much. And they put out the gauges. Tabor was Travelers, and they put the rain gauges. Not Curtis, his father, Harry. Harry. And so we got enough rain. So I said, "Babe, we got rain insurance. We got paid there, and we got paid here."
Oh.
We after she played, there was a
Did you hit golf balls up from home plate?
right over the scoreboard.
That's
We had Toby Lyons hitting it with her. He was at Warren at Connewango Valley.
Mm-hmm.
I brought Toby in, and Toby didn't want to get paid. Toby says, "This is a treat," Babe Dickerson. I gave Toby $50, and I forced it on him. He wouldn't take it. I said, "Toby, you're a golf profession. This is your business." I said, "You don't give these things away." And I gave him the $50. I forgot what I paid her. She got somewhere around, I'd say $500, somewhere around there. But, and she was not Swedish. She was Norwegian. And
Good thing to keep a secret,
but
James.
we said she's Swedish. She said, "I'm going to tell them the story about one Norwegian who defeated 10 Swedish in some battle." I said, they'll drive you out of
Yeah,
here.
don't do that.
But I talked to Grantlin Rice. I knew Granny quite well. I went to the races with him at Belmont, and he said that she was a great tennis player. There was no money.
Mm-hmm.
He said she shot baskets like this, She went on the tour like the House of David basketball team. I forgot what it was at the House of David. And, she threw the javelin, She threw the softball in the Olympics, high jump, runner, could do anything.
Okay.
She was truly the greatest athlete of all time because there was no one, Jim Thorpe, trying to think who else, you know, you could compare, who could do everything as well as she could. And she fielded ground balls, threw like a man, you know, threw like this. She took batting practice. Her plane was leaving at 9:30, so she put on her exhibition at 8 o'clock. She was through by 8:30, and Audrey and I took her in the car. She just changed her shoes, and she said, "There's a puddle there. Let me clean my feet." So we stopped the puddle. She cleaned her feet in the puddle, and then put her on the airplane.
Sweet.
Oh, what a wonderful lady. I cried when I wrote the letter to her husband when she died. She, you know, see, there was so much done on word of mouth, you know. I mean, she said, "You don't have to pay me." She said, I've enjoyed it. You showed me a good time, and I said, "No," I told her. So she signed her autographs, her autographed the pictures. She called me Little Abner Yoakum.
Oh,
She said, "Nothing but sunshine, Little Abner Yoakum."
isn't that terrific? I guess it's a good time. What was the Wolf's Club? Do you remember that?
Wolf's Club was a bunch of guys at the humidor.
Oh, really?
And they criticized you everything, you know, and Speeder was, you know, alcoholic. He ran the humidor, and he'd say, "Don't pay any attention to those guys," you know.
But they had. It looks like they had a luncheon there for you for
Oh, yes.
3 or 4 years.
Oh, they were wonderful. You know, this luncheon was quite a luncheon. You had these celebrities, but you know who stole the show? Darb Whalen from Lockwood.
Oh, sorry.
Funniest guy in baseball.
Yeah.
When we had the first Temple Hesed Abraham dinner, Sam Lasser was my accountant, and he and Sam Siegel said, "Would you get a speaker for the men's club dinner, a big sports celebrity?" And I said, "Well, you know, tell me who you'd want." He said, "I'll get you." And he said, "Yeah, I wish we didn't get him." He said, "Would you bring Bob Christenberry?" He was New York State boxing commissioner. He became postmaster, had the one arm. So I called Bob and I said, "Would you come here at Temple Heads?" And he said, "Yes, I will." They had a meeting of the committee, and I told them, I said, "This is ridiculous. You guys should put on a big sports dinner, turn the proceeds over to charitable causes." So they had a meeting, and Harry Peck and they all just said, "We will have a dinner, but you have to be co-chairman." I said, "Hell, I don't even belong to your church." And I said, and they said, "Well, would you do it?" I said, "I'll do it for 1 year." So we got all these. I said, "We'll have a newspaper man of the year." So we got Shirley Povitz. Jim Tatum was the coach of the year. They were undefeated in Maryland. We got Joey Maxim, light heavyweight boxing champion. We got. I said, "I'll get ball players." So I got Nellie Fox because he broke in here, and Vic Wirtz and Garvey, and Ned won 20 games that year for 8th place club. I don't think it's ever been duplicated.
Yeah.
And let's see who we got else. We got Harry Wismer to be master of ceremonies, and I said, and people who knew said, "You know Darb Whalen, why don't you get Darb?" So I called Darb and I said, "Darb, would you come to this and say a few words?" And Darb was petrified. He said, "All these big names," and he stole the show. He is the funniest guy. He told stories. You know, he and Homer Servos. Mrs. Servos called. We're going to have dinner with him Saturday, and Homer Servos was from Lockport, and he said, "Darb Whalen's the funniest guy." I said, "Yes, we had him at luncheon." So he came in here, and what a talk he gave.
Yeah.
Harry Wismer was a super MC. You know, he gave us a week's publicity. How he's coming to Jamestown. He had a national show, 15 minutes, and Harry he's the greatest exaggerator, you know. And Harry would say, "I'm going to Jamestown, the best minor league city in baseball. We're having a big dinner," and he mentioned all these people, you know, the Temple Hesed Abraham, and he just put on a show there. God, what a wonderful show.
Well, you started something that lasted through my childhood and adulthood, which is.
I got all those guys for nothing.
Wow.
And when they honored me and I came back,
Yeah.
and they started telling me what they're paying, I said, "I don't want any part of this."
Yeah.
But see, I got Joe Louis here, and I got Jack Dempsey here afterwards.
Yeah.
But we got these guys for nothing. Sam Rosetta, no, but it's a crime when you know what happened. You know, Spark Anderson says you've got to give back something to the public. So you can't be a taker, and that's what sports is not doing.
And he's the last of an era. I mean,
Yeah.
Sparky is just terrific.
Great guy. Great guy.
He's terrific.
What's it going to take to get Nellie Fox in the Hall of Fame?
There have been a few instances where people didn't get in and should get in. Nellie should get in, and I guess Rizzuto should get in. They're not giving it to them. I'm very close to Jimmy Campbell and John McHale. They're a board of trustees, and it's the writers. They control it.
Is a man on the street, if he pushes, is he hurt or help?
Depends. I pushed Greasy Neal for football Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Finally, Fred Russell, who was head of the Writers Association, from Tennessee. He said, "John, lay off all your friends writing me." He said, "We're going to take Greasy Neal in a couple of years," but he said, "Lay it off." So it just depends.
There's a big edit. Russ and I are the only members of the Nellie Fox Society Jamestown branch.
I'm going to use the boys' room. Be right
Sure,
there. I was at Plans and Policies in the G3 section in Washington, and I said, "Audrey, this Sunday, let's go up to Frederick, Maryland. Philadelphia Athletics are training there." And we went up there, and so I sat with Connie Mack, and he said, "I got some ball players I want you to see." He said, I'll send you a couple." I said, "We're going to be with the Tigers, but I'll talk to him about it." And he said, "We got a little kid here, second baseman, Nellie Fox." I said, "Mr. Mack, he played for Jamestown." He said, "Oh, I forgot about it." So I'm assistant farm director of the Tigers, and I come into Detroit, and I'm sitting with John McHale, and he said, "Philadelphia's got a couple of kids that you'd be interested in." First game we played in the major leagues, Nellie Fox, Billy DeMars was the shortstop. It was the first game they played. And so I saw Nellie play his first major league game. Nellie was a tough kid,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he was a tough kid, He wouldn't take anything from anybody. He deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, and he'll get in there, but I always said I'd like to see guys get in the Hall of Fame when they're alive.
Mm-hmm. That's the hard part.
I think it's a crime that certain players, they're dead.
Yeah.
And it's so much better when they're in and they can, if they smell the roses for a while.
Well, John, you can come back. Russ and I have for years contemplated this big banquet we'd have. Nellie Fox gets in. Mrs. Fox is still alive down in Chambersburg,
Is she,
Pennsylvania.
Audrey and I were driving back from Charlottesville, and I said, "Let's take a back road." We went up the back road, and I said, "There's Chambersburg." I said, "Nellie Fox."
Yep, and I'd worked when I was
He had the bowling alley there too, right near there.
at the bowling alley. I was at Dickinson Law School.
Oh, yeah?
I was a clerk for a judge down in Chambersburg, so I kind of tied in. And a couple of years ago, I'm an old-time autograph nut, and I figured, gee, from Jamestown, I've got to have something of Nellie Fox. So I wrote her and called her, and she was very gracious and found old fishing licenses and things like that and sent up. And I told her, I said, we're going to have a day someday when we can bring you up, and we'll celebrate the fact that Nellie Fox will be the first man to go from Jamestown to Cooperstown.
Is that the first one?
There's nobody that we've ever had play through Jamestown or play in Jamestown as a team to go to Cooperstown, and that would be a first. It'd be kind of a fun excuse
Oh, sure.
to bring back some of the ball
Right.
players who have played in Jamestown and gone to the big show.
Right. That would be wonderful.
Oh. And John, you'd be front and center
I'll come. Oh, heck yes.
because
It's
we've talked.
inevitable. It's going to happen, isn't it?
It is. It's going to come, and you have to be careful. I'll tell you an insight on the story of why Rose is not taken in the Hall of Fame. Some of the great legends in golf said if he goes in the Hall of Fame, we're never going to show up. See, when we take guys into the Golf Hall of Fame, no one shows up. It's tragic. This last year, we took in 3 of the old-timers and Chichi Rodriguez. And, Nicholas lives in Palm Beach. And he said, Palm Beach, the ceremony, he didn't show up, And when Nancy Lopez was taking the Golf Hall of Fame, she didn't even show up for it and had somebody else receive the award. Now, in baseball, they go to Cooperstown.
Mm-hmm.
When Chandler was taken in, Audrey and I flew from California to take in because he was a dear friend. And his whole family was there, and they were so thrilled. Marcella, we knew the girls and the boys, and they said, "This is so great that you come in here from California for it." And I introduced Audrey to Charlie Gehringer, and I said, "Best two-strike man I've ever seen." Charlie said, "Yeah, I choked up on the bat, you know." I saw him in Cleveland one day get 4 hits, 2 strikes. And he just choked up and he just punched it out. And you found Ernie Banks, Joe DiMaggio, they all come for it.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the legends said, "We won't come if a guy like Rose gets in here." This is what influenced the writers more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Because they just said, "We're not going to show up here. We're not going to be, with him in the golf tournament and all that." Now, that'll die out because the players will be dead, so Rose will be taken in someday. But this is why golf, Cooperstown, is something special. There's no other place like it. And Ernie Banks grabbed me. You get a kick out of this because he said, "I have to say a few words. I don't have anything to say. You can help me." And I said, "Ernie, that's rather quick." But I said, Dave Halberstam had in his book something that has captured me, and I use it a little bit with my philosophy of life. And O.J. Simpson, who was playing for the Buffalo Bills, was driving his Porsche or whatever he had, listening to a hockey game. And an obscure Canadian hockey announcer said, "Fame is a vapor, popularity is an accident, money takes wings, the only thing that endures is character."
Mm-hmm.
And I called Dave and I said, "Who is the hockey announcer?" Because I knew a lot of them, when we lived here. And he said, "No one knows. We never been able to come up." So I told this to Ernie Banks. He said, "I'm going to use it." So next day, I'm not around. He grabs Audrey. He said, "Where's that husband of yours? I didn't write it down. I've got to have it down." He said, "I forgot it." No, but there's nothing like the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. Canton's a big city, it's a little different. Cooperstown is just hard to get into, hard to get out.
You bet.
Don't use this.
Yeah.
Don Pembridge said, "I have a client who wants to go to the Hall of Fame game. Can you get me 2 tickets?" And I said, "Don, I suppose I can. I'll see what I can do." It's harder than getting World Series tickets.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize this, so I got him 2. And is it today?
It was yesterday.
Yesterday. It was yesterday. And so I got him 2 tickets. It was Los Angeles Dodgers and Cleveland.
Cleveland, yeah.
And gave them to him. He's going to sit in a good seat right behind third base, they said. But I didn't realize. I said, "Boy, I'm not going to make these semi-promises without knowing what I'm getting into."
That's right. Oh,
they said there were only about 2,000 seats, under the roof. So, it was hard. But I think that Nellie Fox, on his merits, should be in. There shouldn't be any question. But see, longevity means the most important thing, and if you break a certain amount of statistics, then you're automatically in. But I think you should be compared to your peers at the time of your playing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're outstanding, like he was in the All-Star game all the time, that should be it.
Mm-hmm.
And see, Cepeda's never got in because of the bat thing, and he probably belongs. Time will heal everything on Cepeda and then Rose. They'll get in eventually.
Any old timers that they've missed completely? The Cecil Travises of the world, the Riggs Stevensons, any of those?
Cecil Travis was a great hitter.
Yeah.
God, he was dominated because of Ted Williams.
Mm-hmm.
But he could hit. God, he was a good-looking hitter too.
You had him at Washington?
Yeah. He was quite a guy. I liked him. I liked him very much. He was Ozzie Blugie was third base.
Let's segue into Washington, the Senators.
Okay.
Get us into where were you with Clark Griffith?
Well, I knew the Richardson family. The Richardson family bought 80% of the Washington Senators, gave Clark Griffith 40% to be the managing partner and everything, and they owned 40%. And I was working, I was in the Marine Corps, and Vince Flaherty, Bob Considine, Shirley Povich, 3 different papers were the 3 dominating sports writers in Washington. Vince Flaherty wrote an article, Washington Senators were terrible, and he says, well, Mr. Griffith does not own the Washington Senators. He owns only 40%. And told the whole story about Richardson. So I called Vince Flaherty, and I called Mr. Richardson, went up to Philadelphia to see him, if he'd be interested in selling it. And he said he wouldn't be interested at this time. And then he died, but he gave 2 tickets for every home ball game to my wife and myself in the visitor's box behind the dugout. So we sat. My wife almost had the first child at the game, and so we'd go to all the games. And then in 1948, he died, and his brother was the executor of his will. They were in the warehousing business, refrigerated warehouses in Philadelphia. And I called Mr. Richardson, and his son was alive then, and his brother had died, and he said, Joe Sears, a very prominent lawyer, is the executor, and would you call him? And I called Mr. Sears and said, I'd like to come in and talk to you about, would you sell the 40%? 1949 is now. And I went over to see him, and he told me that he would be interested in taking a bid. And I said, well, I don't want to make a foolish bid, so we talked generally price. And he said, I'm coming to New York for a board meeting of a big company. And he said, come into New York to the headquarters. And he said, I'll give you some time.
Mm-hmm.
So I went over to see him, and I offered him. And he said, that's not enough money. I said, well, would you give me a few hours? And he said, give you as much time as you want. And I borrowed an awful lot of money from a guy in Bradford named Hugh Grant. I mortgaged our house on Beachview, and I had some money. And I called Hugh Grant, and I said, Hugh, would you loan me more money? I said, he wants more. He said, do you think it's a smart deal? I said, I think it is. I said, you've got 14,000 lobbyists in Washington. And I said, you should be able to sell at least 2 season tickets to half of them, so you get 14,000 seats. And some will buy boxes. And I said, the bulk was mismanaged terribly. And he said, well, if you say so, okay. And Hugh wasn't going to have any equity.
Mm-hmm.
He was just helping me, that's all. And I went back and I said, I raised the price $10 a share. He said, young man, you've made a deal. And he said, if you came back and asked and offered $2 more, he said, I'd have dropped negotiations. He said, you've got a deal. And he said, I never asked you, where are you getting your financial backing? He said, I've got a partner who's just going to help me. He's not going to have an equity, named Hugh Grant. He said, I'm glad you didn't lie to me, because he said, if you had, he said, we'd have stopped. So we bought the thing, and supposedly I'm going to keep it a secret till I see Mr. Griffith. I didn't want anybody to know.
Mm-hmm.
And I divided it up in 7 interests. So Mr. Griffith would not know how it was in any way, So we divided up in 7. They were all under my, trying to think what would be the legal term.
Did you have a voting trust or stock agreement among the 40%? So you kind of voted the stock?
Well, yes, I voted the whole thing.
Yeah.
And went to see Mr. Griffith, and he was greatly upset. He hated the Richardsons. They had quarreled. He said, I should have bought it. And it was a fact, I already bought it. And I left him, and the story broke. Someone leaked it out, maybe Mr. Griffith did, I don't know. And Francis Dan, the sports editor of the Washington Star, called me up and said, can I come up here to Jamestown? I want to spend 2 days and talk to your minister, and because we belong to the Congregational Church, Frank, can't think of his last name. And he wanted to see the minister, and he wanted to see Norm Robinson, who was our gas station operator, and he went to see all these people, and he ran out pictures on the front page of the Washington Star under a Christmas tree, just during Christmas. And I said, never again am I going to have this kind of exposure. I hated it. It wasn't fair. We went to the went to the New Year's dance, and the babysitter said the phone never stopped ringing. She had put the phone down. People were calling you. Taylor Spink, an old friend, they all hurt. Why didn't I tell them? I didn't want anybody to know. And then Mr. Griffith made up his mind. He said, I'm not going to let this young whippersnapper second guess me. He said, I'm not going to let him. And he said he'll make a deal with me. He votes my stock, and I'll have his at the end of his life.
Mm-hmm.
I saw Connie Mack at Philadelphia Athletics, West Palm Beach, and he told me, he said, just don't do anything. It's going to be all yours. And when you borrow that kind of money, you've got to have some results.
Mm-hmm.
And we got a dividend. The dividend was huge, and I gave it all to Hugh Grant. I said, you're loaning this money, you can have the whole dividend. Well, then I was locked in. I couldn't get a job in baseball because I owned 40% of a ball club.
Yeah.
And so I was locked up. And I turned to Sam Lasser and I said, I want to get on with my life. And he said, well, why don't you become an investment banker? I said, I don't want to sell stocks and bonds. He said, no. He said, on the corporate side. I said, I can't read a balance statement except my own. And he said, you'll learn. We'll teach you. And so in 1950, I started doing this type of work.
Mm-hmm.
And I got into leveraged buyouts before it was popular. And we never did an unfriendly one. And I just then became an investment banker on the corporate side. And never wanted to go back in baseball.
Yeah. Now, did you sell your interest? How long did you have the Senators?
About a year.
About a year?
Yeah.
Did you sell it to the Griffiths?
No, sold it to a man who was the man on the white horse. He was going to save the Griffiths. And then he got to be a bitter enemy, Gabe Murphy. Mr. Griffith. See, Mr. Griffith owned 26%. Thelma Haynes, Joe Haynes, his wife, owned 7%, and Calvin owned 7%.
Mm-hmm.
So the three of them owned 40%. Gabe Murphy's family came from Watertown. His wife's family, very wealthy. They're in the construction business. And he said, this is my stock. I'm the graduate manager of the business side of Georgetown. And he says, I should own this stock. And he kept on pestering me. And a couple other guys in Washington wanted to buy it. And I sold it to Gabe Murphy. And then he sold the Griffiths 11%. Then he went out and bought 11%. And see, there was 20%. I could have bought the 20%.
Who had that?
About 8 or 9 individuals.
Bunch of people.
But here's the problem. What do I do with Mr. Griffith? I can't evict him like Sue Avery when they kicked him out of Montgomery Ward. Here's a tradition, a legend.
Right.
I said, if I have 51%, I can't evict him. His friends would rally to him then. They rallied to me because I was the underdog. But if now I said, Mr. Griffith, you're out, you couldn't do it. So it wasn't. So he sold 11%, gave Griffith 51% the family. Then he bought 11%, so he'd have 40. Then Calvin moved it to Minneapolis, and he'd go up for a board meeting, take the train. All the trains go to Chicago in the morning, and you can't leave till night. So he'd come up and spend the day with me and cry and whine. He said, that Calvin Griffith doesn't know a thing about baseball. He said, he's the worst, And I said, all he does is make money for you, Gabe, And finally, Gabe sold his 40% before Calvin sold out to Pohlad and that group. But it was, I have nothing but great respect for Mr. Griffith. And there's no animosity. In fact, you go on this committee? I said, what am I going to do? He said, just greet him when he comes off the airplane. I said, all right. So Farley gets on, it's a DC-3 Allegheny Airlines, and they push the ramp up, and he gets on, he looks at everybody, and he sees me. I get up there, he said, who are those people? I said, that's Postmaster Joe Jones, this is so-and-so. And you know, he had a great memory. He said, hello, Joe, how's everything at the post office? He greeted everybody, and Farley and I got to be very good friends.
Yeah. Well, you got to, just think of baseball alone.
That was my key.
Yeah.
Baseball opened doors. See, football was nothing. They had crowds of 15,000, 20,000. Basketball was nothing. Baseball. That's why I could open a door in the investment banking business.
Yeah.
Charlie Dyson, his son is John Dyson.
Mm-hmm.
I did 3 deals with Charlie Dyson. And he always said, you know so many people. It's so much more interesting talking to you than someone who's just an investment banker as dull as can be. Mm-hmm. And see, baseball opened the doors for me. I owe a lot to baseball. I owe a lot to golf because golf gave me something to do. Yeah.
Now we were talking at Sportsman's Club, and you were I think I threw out the name Billy Evans, and you had a very funny story about him and
the Peaches.
Yeah.
See, Billy was an umpire, and he fought with Ty Cobb on the grandstand. He said Ty was choking me. He said he'd kill me. He said that's the way Ty fought. He'd use his knee, and Billy fought like this, the old Southern style, like a gentleman. And he said they pulled Ty Cobb off him. He said he'd have killed me. He was so vehement. And Billy liked those peaches that Greenbrier used to have. They would, gigantic peaches, they cut them in 2 and freeze them, and then put them in cans. And Billy insisted on having them at the lunch table at Tiger Stadium. And Waukegan said, that's ridiculous. Why should we have those kind of peaches? Expensive and everything else. And Billy said, he said, Mr. Briggs can afford it. He said, don't worry, That's the way Billy was. Billy was a little pompous,
Was he?
Oh, yes, Billy was pompous.
Now he was the Tigers general manager throughout the time you were here? Yeah. Did he ever come to Jamestown? No?
Bob Shockey married a girl from Warren.
Mm-hmm.
So that was Bob Shockey's relationship here.
I also saw that in one of those programs, Marv Olson holding up a Yankees.
He never played for the Yankees.
He never played for the Yankees.
No.
You had no relationship with the Yankees?
No relation.
So it was just kind of a crazy thing?
Yes. I don't know. We had no control. That's the Wolf Club. Had no control.
Russ and I were talking while you were out. That was part of the great revelation. We were trying to figure out the Eagles, the Moose.
Yes.
Nobody in Jamestown. We talked with them. Who's the Wolf? Nobody knows.
It was, I'll tell you the leaders of it, of the Wolf Club. One of my announcers, George Troutman, was a great guy. Oh, a wonderful person. Can't say enough about him.
In the back of one of them there had the Kessler, George Kessler. And
No, George was not that. Carlson. He was the announcer. What the heck was Carlson's name?
Thor?
Yes, Thor was a big one in the Wolves Club.
Oh, yeah.
Peter Lofgren, Thor, Carlson, probably Sam Forsey. I'm trying to think who else. And they were. It was independent, completely on their own.
I love it.
They did whatever they wanted. George DePillo, funny story about him. George DePillo was a pull hitter, big prospect in Detroit. Everybody wanted George DePillo. Didn't have a father, I think divorced. His mother was one who had some kind of reign on him. And they sent him to Jamestown, and Marv doesn't want him. He's hard to handle. And the players don't like him, and he misses the bus to Olean, and that's a no-no. Mm-hmm. And he finished the year out, and next year I'm assistant farm director of the Tigers, and we're down to Bennettsville, South Carolina. We've got Flint and Williamsport training. Gene DeSatels and Jack Tighe the managers of the 2 Class A teams. So we got some pretty good prospects. We got Frank House, and we got some pretty good ball players. And George DePillo is there. And neither one wants him. They want to send him to Durham. Durham's got Ace Parker, one of the sweetest guys, and what a great athlete. Played professional football and baseball at the same time. And he's Duke's immortal, you know. And kids love to play for Ace Parker. And they said, you farm him out. I have to sign the papers. And they said, you tell him. I said, are you afraid? You're damn right we are. They said, you tell him. So I said, George, you're going to be sent down to Durham. And he exploded. Durham, left field, 380 feet. He said, I can't pull the ball. He said, 380 feet. He said, I won't hit many home runs. He said, I knew that you were the one who did it. As soon as they declared you assistant farm director, he said, I knew I was in trouble. I was the one fighting with Marv to keep him, you know. And I said, George, I said, if you can talk to Jack Tye or Gene Desautels to go to Flint and Williamsport, I'll rip this apart. They didn't want him, you know. He's blaming me. And I said, you're going to like playing for Ace Parker. And George never made it. He just could not adjust. And Red Rolfe told me the problems. You know, he'd bring his mother with him to Tiger Stadium, and George would lose his head, and he'd start talking rough to his mother. And Red said, I grabbed him and shoved him against the wall and said, that's not the way you speak to your mother. But he was just a mixed-up kid. He wasn't a bad kid.
Yeah.
He was obsessed with being a major league ball player. You know, when there was dirty work, Marv would let me handle it. This was a good team because, you see, as good as it was, this is 48, Babe Beer wasn't on the team yet. And Babe was, heck, it was money in the bank. He was going to win when he pitched.
What about Pat Haggerty? He came with...
That's a funny story about him. Detroit, Wish Egan calls me up and he said, we got 3 guys we're going to work out. Would you like to come up and watch him at Tiger Stadium? You're going to get 1 or 2. These are all college guys. Haggerty, the football player from Wisconsin, baseball and football, ran like a football player, but he got in the majors. And the kid from Danville, Virginia, who probably went to school only 1 year, but what a good-looking hitter. He looked like Dusty Rhodes. Couldn't run, but he could, great swing. The 3 players, and Wish says, well, who do you want? I said, the guy from Wisconsin. He said, you're not going to get him. I said, okay, I'll take the guy from Danville. You're not going to get him. You're going to get Pat Haggerty. I said, holy mackerel. I said, Pat can't throw. He had a terrible arm. All he did was lead the Pony League and hitting. Pat
He played so close, didn't he?
Right. He's refereeing in San Diego, so I went down to the dressing room to see him because I knew Gene Klein, the owner. Pat fell all over me. He was so happy. I said, Pat, I'll tell you, you were the 3rd man. I wanted the other 2 guys. I said, you'll lead the league. Pat Haggerty was a good influence on the kids. He was a sweet guy. He's just quit refereeing. First year, he's not going to referee anymore. He became principal of the school in Colorado. He was a good hitter. Gosh, he was a good hitter. But, you know, so we didn't have him till 48. Till June, and we get Fremming. We get those, and Beer. Those 2 guys came up. So they weren't even on the club. John Faught, the only reason we got John Faught was because of his brother the pitcher, and so I promised to take him. Howard Gutzall, Huntington, Pennsylvania. Gee, it was Jackie Schultz. Robert DeKay should have been a golfer, not a ball player. He could, a good golfer. But that team was too good to not win the pennant. Milt Jordan, my gosh, he was a major leaguer. We tried to do this, and then Jerry Kleinsmith. What a sweet kid he was. Good curveball. Fremming, Kleinsmith, and Beer and Jordan were. No one had 4 better pitchers in the history of Class D ball. You know, we should have won it, but Marv lost his spark, and I lost my spark, and then push him. And we all Sweden. Well, I said, what a perfect name for a kid coming to Jamestown. He looked like Marty Marion, and the sweetest guy. Well, I'm in Detroit, to see these 3 ball players. And I called home, and I said, "How did we do?" And my wife said, "We were ahead 12-0, we got beat." I said, "No." She said, "Yes." I said, "I can't believe it. We were ahead 12-0. I got back, I said, "Marv, what happened?" He said, "You just can't believe it." He said, "We're 12-0 ahead." And he said, "We lost like 15-12. He said, "We couldn't do a thing after that. Lost the momentum." Keith Allsweet was on that team.
He was shortstop, wasn't he?
Yes. Nice kid.
I remember, I don't know, sitting there one night for 2 extra inning doubleheader games.
Wow.
That's the night he hit one over the light tower in the outfield.
What was it? He was just and Danny Haven was a nice boy from St. Charles, Michigan. A ball player came from there, played for Wellsville, pitched in the majors with the Red Sox and the Tigers. What the heck was his name? He came from right where Danny Haven. Who do I mean? Came from Wellsville, but the Yankees have pitcher. He was Mr. Something in Detroit. He became a great pitcher. He and Danny Havens were contemporaries. What the heck was it? A major league pitcher with the Tigers. Real important.
And he pitched for who?
Wellsville. He and Danny Havens. He pitched Sundays in Detroit. They always pitched.
Frank Larry.
Oh,
No, not
Face.
Frank. Huh?
Face. Elroy Face.
No, not
He
Elroy.
was in
Elroy was
Bradford.
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 When our son was all these people used to come to our house in Chicago. John Weiss was the business manager of the Bradford Club, and he used to bring Mayo Smith, and Mayo's a good friend, and Benny Bengow, and Shirley Povich, and all. So Jim got to know all these the guys, and Jim was about 10 or 11, and I said, "Jim, I want to see the Cubs play." I said, "They're playing a team that has 2 great ball players." And we went down there, and Clemente was in right field. The score was 1-0, and Clemente threw a guy out at home plate, and they put Face in. Face threw 2 pitches and saved the game. I said, "Jim, you've seen 2 of the best."
That's right.
Face won 19 games as a relief pitcher in a row. That record will never be burned.
That's it.
Oh. Face, Spencer Harris liked him. He was general manager of Olean, and he drafted him. Brooklyn drafted him out of the Phillies. We had a pitcher, a little kid like Face, named Earl Evans. Nanny Globe.
Pennsylvania.
Right. I'm having lunch with Rip Collins one day. I took him to the Chicago Club, and I was with the Cardinals and Rip and Johnny Mize. We had 2 first basemen, pretty good ball players.
You bet.
And something Rip said about Pennsylvania, and he said, "I came from a little town in Pennsylvania." I said, "Yeah, I know you did, Rip." He said, "You know it?" "Yeah." He said, "I know your town." He said, "Oh, nobody knows my town." I said, "I came from Naniglow." He said, "I can't believe it." He said, "Naniglow, that's near Evansburg." He said, "How would you know?" I said, "Well, we had a boy named Earl Evans. That's all he talked about you was Rip Collins, Rip Collins."
What year was Frank Larry here?
In the 50s.
50s.
Yeah.
Come later.
Maybe 49, 50, somewhere afterwards. He was Mr. Bulldog. 2 no-hitters. God, he could beat the Yankees.
Yeah, easily. Huh?
Oh. Frank Larry was... We had a second baseman who was pretty good from Alabama. His brother played for the Red Sox.
Bowling. Frank Bowling.
Frank and Milt. Pretty good ball players.
Now, Frank played in Jamestown, right?
Yes. Good. They had a lot of good ball players here.
See, that's what we'd love to have. We'd love to be able to have an excuse. I think Jamestown, kind of for nostalgia is big, is to track down those guys who played. And Joe Ginsberg, for example, I saw him in Florida.
Did you see Joe?
And he was at an old timers game, and I had a press pass just because I like to do that stuff. And he was there, so I'm sitting next to him, and it strikes me, Ginsberg, Jamestown, Fox. So I'm talking to him, and he's just the nicest guy. And he goes, "Oh, if you ever have it," because Jamestown, he and his wife had either just married or something, but if they speak fondly of Jamestown. And I said, "You have an excuse. I'll be there in a moment. I'll help you track down the guys that I played with in '44, etc." But that type of thing, it'd be a great excuse. You can, the Larrys, the Bowlings, and I think you could get them back here without too much ado.
Ginsberg played. He played for Major League. His father had the bar there, and when you came back from Big Stadium to the Cadillac, you'd walk right by this bar. And, no, but Ginsberg and Armstrong were 2 catchers. They both played in the Major League. They were on the same team. Can you imagine that? same team. I think that the guys who played in Jamestown really got a break because the people were so nice to them. The newspapermen were so nice to them. You know, there was no one nicer in the world as a human being than Wade Forsythe.
Yes.
You know, he never would say an unkind word. When I bought the Jamestown Ball Club, he wrote a story about me. He said he could have made the majors. Hell, I couldn't have made the majors except as a water boy. That's the way Wade was, you know.
Yeah.
And so you know, this is a unique town. You know, people say, "Why do you go back to Jamestown?" I said, "Well, we like Chautauqua very much. My wife can do everything she wants." And I said, "I see a lot of old friends." And I said, "You know, I was brought up right nearby here, and then I lived here from 45 to 52. I said, this is home for us." So I said, "We love to come back here." You know, Homer Servoz, Homer must be in his 80s. You know, Judge Cass, I got him his chance to go to Michigan State. You know, and his father was a close friend. And so, I mean, there's so many things I want to see here. Bert Anderson, you know, he's got some eye problems now. Poor Bert. His whole family, you know, Dee Sullivan, his sister has it, and his mother had it, and now it's affecting him. He can't see the golf ball, you know, when he hits it, you know, which way did it go. But these are very, very treasured people. And then I see Tommy Hurst. He sneaks up on the golf course and sees me. I get a big kick out of that. And you know, I wish I'd see Jimmy Carlson. Jimmy never shows his face around, and he has Paul Webb. You know, and I tell the children and the grandchildren, I said, he was a hell of a ball player. But you know, the war just ruined it. 5 years. You come back, you're 26 years old instead of 21.
My dad said to my dad, he was just a big fan of baseball, but he said, you know, it seems to me Mr. Jachym had a very interesting war career. And you mentioned Guadalcanal, you mentioned...
I was decorated twice, if that's interesting, but I almost lost my life twice in secret landings, PT boats. And the Marine Corps did a lot for me, gave me discipline, and gave me the spirit of teamwork, which is very important. But I'm losing so many of my friends now in the Marine Corps. They're all dying. And then I lost some in the battle. Manchester wrote about one guy, Bob Fowler, went to Dartmouth. He was one of those cleanest cut. He got killed in Pellew. I came home before Pellew. We had too many captains, and I got a special promotion to captain, and then they joined us, and then all of a sudden we've got in a battalion maybe 6 or 8 excess captains, and they took you on your record, which is unfair. Because I was decorated, I got points for that. So I was the first one selected to come home. That's when I came back to plans and policies. But the Marine Corps did a lot for me. I remember bringing Charlie Brush back. He was my commanding officer. He came back from Korea. He was a colonel then. I took him to George Chambers to Town Club. And my wife laughs. Charlie just died about 3 weeks ago. He's a little All-American from Montclair Teachers College. And he came to visit us when we were first married. He terrified her. He wanted coffee, boiling hot, the hottest coffee. Then he'd take ice cubes and put in the coffee. My wife would say, you know, he wants the hottest coffee and he put the ice cubes. But I guess people who drink coffee think that's a good way, you know. And he died a week ago. Got a call at 5:30 in the morning. I said, I get calls in California at 5:30 because it's 8:30. I can't believe it. And I picked up the phone. This woman was distraught, and she told me her name, you know, and it's a common name. And she said Charlie died just about 10 minutes ago, and he had a heart attack. He was visiting at a reunion at Montclair, his class, and he died. Well, and we had 3 boys from South Dayton in the 1st Marine Division. One was a paratrooper, Chet Milks. He played for Guanda State Hospital baseball. Don Wells was a postal rural mail carrier. He married a girl from Australia, and myself. And 3 of us were on Guadalcanal, and I looked them both up. Chet fought. He was a paratrooper, but we never dropped paratroops in the Marine Corps. And he was on the front lines when they were trying to take the airport from the back door. And my company went through him, through his position, and I said, does anyone seen Chet Milks? They said he wasn't hit. They had terrible casualties. They took him all back.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he's all right, but he was shell-shocked because they fought all night. It was a terrible experience. And they lost maybe 1/3 of their personnel. And but isn't that strange that 3 guys from South Dayton were in Guadalcanal, 1st Division? No, but the Marine Corps did a lot, probably did more for me than I did for them. So when I was at headquarters, it was very interesting. Maury Maverick's son was in our outfit, and Maury was in the cabinet. And he said, now when you get back, he said, I'm writing Dad a letter, and he said, I want you to look him up. And his father called me, and he kind of adopted us. We went to all the things. Went to the Russian embassy for the Red Star dinner, which is the most sought-of invitation. And I laugh. I've told this story maybe 50 times. I told Don Myers this story also. But we were coming in through Gromyko as the ambassador. And all of a sudden the cameramen are getting there, and my wife and I, she's 20 and I'm 26, and I looked at her, and said, I hope she's looking good. And I looked at her, and I looked over in the corner of my eye, and there's Stettinius, Secretary of State, and his wife right behind us. Their cameras are for them. We thought it was for us. I lost some of my men, and one was from State College. Again, he's dead. They got him the Navy Cross. I wish I got him the Navy Cross when he was alive, but then he didn't got it then. And we had casualties. We have to have casualties if you're fighting. You're not going to. I'll tell you what surprised me about the Marine Corps. I was shooting at the Japanese. We had the first patrol 2 days before the Battle of Tenru. And I couldn't believe they're shooting at me. I'm the good guy.
Yeah.
In the movies, we shoot at them, and they're shooting at me. I couldn't believe it. This was such a big surprise. I said, those bastards are trying to hit me. I was shooting at them. It's okay.
Yeah.
That's how dumb you are. I have no animosity. A year and a half ago, I received a call from a doctor in Las Cruces, Mexico, and he says, I have a Guadalcanal symposium this year. He said, your name has come up, and would you come and speak? He said, National Geographic's doing it. It's going to be televised, and we're going to do it for, it'll probably take 2 nights and 1 day. He said, Joe Foss is going to be there. He said, you're going to be the youngest officer because I was a captain. And there were generals and admirals, Navy, and we spoke, and they had 3 Japanese people participated, officers. And I had to speak just off without any, and then they asked questions. And I told them the story that, I was so surprised that they were, and I said, I'm sure you were as vitally concerned with your cause as we were with our cause, And I said, I have no animosity towards anybody. I just think it's too bad we lost so many people. That's about it. Well, we had, our colonel was Cates. His brother-in-law was Tom Prothero, who, his father, Doc, had the Philadelphia Phillies in Memphis. And he was a sports minded. We hit Australia. We all were, I weighed about 140 pounds. I lost everything. We were in just horrible shape. He said, we're Melbourne Cricket Grounds. And he said, I want a softball team. And he said, you're in charge. He said, give us a regimental team. And Briggs Beautyware, a guy named Wiz Taylor, and Briggs Beauty were national champions in softball. He was the 3rd string pitcher. So I said, you're going to play with us. And we had a second baseman from the Cardinal organization, and we had Hal Jennings, Red Sox. And we had a pretty good softball team. But, softball, fast pitching is a pitcher's game. They're going to strike out 15, 16 guys, and a couple of guys hit a foul ball. It's pretty good. And so we played in the Melbourne Cricket Grounds where they had the Olympics. And the ground on the cricket grounds are like putting greens. It's a big field, but it's that beautiful. Just the natives probably said those darn American Jamestown a great deal, because here I was a kind of a cocky young man coming in here, and I could have struck the wrong chords. And you prepare and you try to do everything right, and I had good guidance, but yet the people opened their arms and made us kind of a major event. And I think the one reason that it was we gave them a first-class operation, but the so-called business leaders went to the ball game, and I learned that from McLaughlin, Major McLaughlin, who had the Chicago Blackhawks. He said, if you get the leaders of the community, the rest will come along. And I think that was one reason. We used to have Ernest Kessler, Stolbros, they'd come to every game. Harry Tabor, you know, and I think that gave some credibility, you know, this is a good thing. And when we didn't raise our prices were very modest, and Harold Loveton raised his prices on the popcorn, you know, and the hot dogs, and he gave quality. We always wanted quality. And the people were so nice to the ball players, they stayed at their homes. Mm-hmm. And they were just so enthusiastic. And I think the atmosphere was unbelievable. And no, I'm very concerned about Jamestown's economic situation, because when we lived here, it was a thriving industrial town. This was the heartland of great furniture. That's all disappeared. And now I guess tourism is our biggest industry. We had the automatic voting machine. We had all those furniture companies. We had Watson. We had all sorts of companies that are no longer in existence, the plywood companies. And this to me is very, very discouraging. And so many young people aren't coming back here. They say we don't have the business opportunity. And I don't know what it's going to take to turn it around. I think this is an industrial revolution throughout our nation. It's not just Jamestown. It's everywhere. But we've got to get some basis for a stronger economy here. And this is completely away from baseball, but it bothers me to have terribly wrong. The fence around it kind of makes it like, you know, we're separate. I think Chautauqua should take the symphony orchestra and play 2 free symphonies at Allen Park or somewhere. Mm-hmm. They should give something of Chautauqua to Jamestown. I think it's wrong. I talked to one of the head trustees in Pennsylvania the other day, bumped into him. And my heart's really Jamestown, even though, you know, we love Chautauqua. And I think there should be a much better relationship than what we have.
I know my wife, who's on the board, just a new person on the board, and she's it's been a real struggle as to how to break down that barrier, because right now it's at us and them. Very few people who live in Jamestown spend any time up here, except for an occasional event, you know, a Friday night, big concert, they'll come up, and all they really got exposed to, when you think about it,